So we'll wait another minute or so before the formal beginning of our time together. And I appreciate very much all the chats and the good mornings. And it's a very friendly and warm way to begin our time together, our meditation together. And thank you for all for being here. So, to begin, I offer my warm greetings to all of you, and especially warm to the people who are new here on 7 a.m. or this morning sitting, who are participating in the Zen Center's intensive on the harmony of Zen and Vipassana. And just a couple of words for those of you who might be here from there is that the way this format works is I usually begin with a few minutes of introductory comments that are setting the context for the meditation of the morning. And then there's some guided meditation that follows that. And then end with what I call a dedication of merit, a variation of that. And then a little at 7:30, what we call a Dharma, a 15-minute talk. If you have problems with the YouTube, that it's frozen, or if I don't appear on the screen at the beginning at all, even though the chats are beginning to roll through, if the chats don't roll through, and if nothing's happening, problems like that are usually resolved by refreshing. And if you're not sure how to refresh, just close the window and open it again in the way you got to it. And the most common problem with not hearing the sound is that there's actually some issue with your computer. And so just check all the settings on your computer, including the speaker setting, and see. And then, like if there's no sound, and you look at the chat, and there's lots of people who are saying no sound, then the problem's here on my end, and hopefully I'll notice soon enough that there's a problem, and that I'm talking just to myself. Usually I didn't push a button. So the harmony of Zen and Vipassana. In my mind and in my heart, I begin this idea of the harmony, or the commonality even, of these two wonderful Buddhist meditation traditions with a teaching from one of our teachers, our first generation of teachers here in the West, studied with a man named Munindra Ji, an Indian who studied in Burma and became a great Vipassana teacher. And he had this wonderful teaching that if it is not simple, it's not Vipassana. And that in simplicity maybe is where commonality, harmony can be found. That there's something powerful and profound about simplicity. A simplicity of being. A willingness and allowing, valuing of just being alive. My Zen teacher, Mel Weitzman, made this powerful statement to me once. We were driving across the bridge here in San Francisco, the Bay Bridge, and I was driving him, and he was asking about my life, and I was telling him about different things that were new for me. And at some point, listening to me, he said, just calmly, relaxedly, it seemed like just the right time, he said, just to be alive is enough. And that was a powerful moment for me. Just to be alive is enough. Just to be simple and breathing and here. And so we make it complicated. And understanding how we make things unnecessarily complicated can help us return to a very powerful, significant way of being, which is to allow this life force, allow this breathing being to manifest, to express itself in this fullest possible way that it can be. That sometimes is called liberated. But to keep it simple. And one of the ways that we make it complicated is by getting preoccupied or caught up in our thinking. And so one of the ways to return to simplicity, return from the fixation, the caught upness in thinking, is to rely on breathing. The rhythm of breathing, the way the inhale appears and disappears, the exhale appears and disappears, the rhythm of that, if we stay close to it, the fluidity, the change, the cycles of that breathing is an alternative to getting the mind caught in thoughts. We come back to the breathing, we stay with that rhythm, that massage of breathing, and it helps us to notice when we wander off in thought and have lost in preoccupation and fantasy. It helps us to know there's an alternative, and we come back to the embodied physical simplicity of just being a human being that's breathing. And in the process of doing so, our minds might protest, have other ideas, and say that other things are more important. And maybe so, but maybe those can wait for later. Maybe first to keep returning to the breathing, being with the breathing, letting the thinking mind quiet down, release itself, thaw, open up, and discover some deeper intimacy with this lived life as it's being lived. So breathing, the simplicity of just being, staying, resting with the breathing, is one way to discover the simplicity of being. No matter what your posture, maybe there's some way you can gently kind of put your body in a little bit more alert. So there's a embodied attentiveness. And then gently closing your eyes. And to begin this connection to breathing, it can be helpful to take a few long, slow, deep breaths. And the fuller breaths is like a ritual reminder of here, this is the meditation hall, the inner meditation hall, the body's experience of breathing. And with a deeper breaths, long exhale, the long exhale, if you can then relax on the exhale. Relax your body. And then letting your breathing return to normal. And then with a normal breath, continue this process of letting go. Relaxing your body. Breathing in and breathing out. As you exhale, relaxing and softening your belly. As you exhale, relaxing your shoulders. As you exhale, softening the muscles of your face. And then when we're attuning ourselves to the experience of breathing, you might think of it as becoming aware of the way of the body's experience of breathing. So it's not so much being in the control tower, looking and focusing on the breathing. It is being inside, feeling, sensing how the body experiences breathing. And feeling the rhythm of the body breathing. Breathing in and breathing out. And feeling that rhythm where it's most pronounced. Sometimes in the belly, sometimes in the chest, or perhaps in the nostrils as the air goes in and out. Wherever it's easiest, nicest. Allowing the attention to rest there. And if you notice your mind wanders off in thought, as simply and non-conflictfully as you can, begin again with your breathing. Always ready to begin again. Allowing yourself the simplicity of riding the body's experience of breathing. attention can be seen to be a food, that wherever attention goes, it's feeding something. If you allow your attention to go into thinking and distracted thoughts, we feed the thinking mind. But if we bring our attention and bring it into awareness of breathing, not just focusing on the breath, but attention is in the awareness of breathing, in the body's experience of breathing, then we're feeding awareness. We're feeding our ability to be present. And then as we come to the end of this sitting, we can dedicate the merit of our practice together for the welfare of others. And one way to do this is to do it consciously and explicitly. To think of merit as the ways that we have benefited from this meditation today. And to spend a few moments at the end of a sitting considering what those benefits might be. Maybe we're calmer or less agitated. Maybe we know ourselves better. We know something about our agitation or even our craziness. And it's good to know it. We can be wiser then. Or maybe we're more accepting, less angry or less afraid, more peaceful, more in touch with ourselves. More forgiving. So the list could be quite long. It doesn't have to be a dramatic benefit, but to consider the benefits, what you can know, and recognize maybe there's many you don't know. And then to consider how those benefits, how you can bring those benefits into the world today. How can you extend those benefits or express them for the welfare and happiness of others? If we live with a wall of separation between ourselves and others, then we're also separated from ourselves. But as the wall comes down, we actually know ourselves more fully. And this dedication of merit is part of this crumbling of the walls and allowing our goodwill to begin spreading out into the world. And not just letting this be a wishful thinking, but to imagine how the benefits of this meditation might support someone in your conversations today, in communications today, and your way of being with someone. And may it be that the benefits of this meditation somehow or other can be expressed in these well-wishing. May all beings be happy. May all beings be safe. May all beings be peaceful. And may all beings everywhere be free. Great. Okay. I'll wait for the stream of no sounds to stop, and then I'll continue. So let's see. Still no sound. Yay, the sound's back. Okay, great. So those of you who are new got to see a little bit how this works. Periodically, I forget to push the buttons, and so that's what happened. So to start over again. It's my honor to begin this series of talks on the harmony of Zen and Vipassana. This week, I'll give the morning 7 a.m. talks like today. And next 2 weeks, my good friends and wonderful teachers from San Francisco Zen Center, Fu Schrader, the abbess of Green Gulch Zen Center, and Paul Haller, former abbot of San Francisco Zen Center in the city, will give the talks. And so, I've been involved in both these wonderful traditions, and traditions I have tremendous respect for, and I celebrate their great value, and I feel very fortunate to have done both. I think they, in myself, have mutually supported each other in all kinds of ways, so to have a chance to talk about the meeting of these two, or the harmony of these two, is a wonderful exercise for me. Sometimes I think of Zen and Vipassana as being the kind of like their meeting is kind of like a Venn diagram, like two circles that overlap some places. And in some teachings, some teachers might both be positioned in their mutual circle in the place where the two circles overlap. And so they seem very similar and very similar teachings. And some might be sitting on opposite sides of the circles so that they don't overlap or share much. And how big those Venn circles are, I don't, how much big that overlap is, I don't know. Maybe it depends on who's defining it. But there's certainly overlap. And but where there's not overlap, there can be harmony, there can be complementarity, there can be ways in which understanding one helps to understand the other. There's a wonderful, for me, wonderful saying that I learned when I was in England that said that if you don't leave England, you don't really know England. And I think if you grew up there, I suppose, if you leave and then come back, you see it in different ways. So sometimes being outside of a particular religious tradition for a while that we've been immersed in helps us to see with clear eyes something we were missing before. And one of those things can be to understand even better the value of the tradition. So one of the kind of wonderful, maybe coincidences of language is that the word Zen comes from the Chinese word Chan, which comes from the Sanskrit word jhana. And it's just a different language pronouncing the same word. And in Pali, the jhana is jhana, which is states of concentration, the practice of concentration. Vipassana comes from the ancient Pali word for insight. And this also, especially here in the modern West, but a little bit in India and in modern times, the word Vipassana no longer simply meant the insights that come from practicing mindfulness, but became the name for a technique of meditation practice, the mindfulness technique in a sense, and then became a word that began to encompass kind of the full teachings and culture and religion of people practicing Vipassana. And so we have this very odd thing or new thing that happened here, especially in the United States, I think, starting, I don't know how many decades ago, but maybe 3 decades ago or so, that we started seeing in the West this expression, the Vipassana tradition. And then there were sometimes meetings or references to the 3 traditions, Zen, Tibetan, and Vipassana. As if these were, and so I was a little surprised to see Vipassana was now a tradition when it's a relatively new word to refer to a school of meditation. But the wonderfulness of it is that, on one hand we have, in the ancient world, Vipassana, the insights of meditation, were supported by jhana, supported by deep concentration. And in teachings of the Buddha, the ancient teachings, these two came in harmony. They worked together. They were partners. And then over time, as Buddhism developed in India, China, Japan, Sri Lanka, Burma, Thailand, and kind of in different ways, meditation remained a constant in some way, one way or the other. There's different countries where they practice Buddhism. And there were people and lineages and schools that really emphasized meditation. And Zen and Vipassana are 2 of them. And once you talk about sitting in meditation, practicing in meditation, there's a lot of overlap to what human beings experience in meditation. Most people, when they sit down to meditate, discover very quickly how out of control their mind is, how much they're thinking and all that, and how many obstacles there are to being really present. And so learning and developing capacity to be present is very much the same no matter what meditation one's doing. We're developing our capacity not to be distracted, not to be lost from our present moment experience. And as we do that, then we become more settled, more calm, which is more the concentration factor. But as we become more settled and more calm, we start seeing more clearly what our experience is, which is the insight, the Vipassana side of it. And these go back and forth. As we become calmer, maybe we see better. As we see better, we can become calmer, or more settled, or more present, whatever the language we have. So coincidentally then, these 2 big traditions, so-called, Vipassana and Zen, are named after these 2 ancient aspects of meditation that in the ancient world were harmonious, were connected to each other quite closely. And so the general way, there's 2 ways of practicing Vipassana. One is directed attention, and the other is undirected attention. And be interesting to hear from the Zen teachers if the same distinction can be made in Zen. When I first started practicing Zen meditation, I was told to direct my attention on the breathing and to count the breaths. And I did that for years, and it was a wonderful practice for me. And and when I went to Burma, they seemingly did the same thing. They told me to now focus. In Zen, they often had an emphasis on feeling the movements of the belly as the breathing happened, the hara. And in Burma, they put the attention in the same place, where the hara area, and to feel the movements there. So this was very familiar to me. It's the same directed attention as I did in Zen. And but what happens with Vipassana practice is that the practice begins to be directed, and then as it goes along, it becomes more undirected. And so we'll see that in the course of this 5 days that I'm be teaching here, that the way that we've come to teach Vipassana, many of us, insight practice, mindfulness in the West, we start with directed practice, and then we begin to opening up the attention to include more and more in the awareness. So we begin with the breathing, and the breathing is a wonderful place to calm down, to relax, to step out of the thinking mind, to see how much we're caught in thought, and then come back. And then we'll go to body, to emotions, to thinking. And then Friday, I'll give you a little taste or a little pointer to the undirected attention of Vipassana, which maybe is similar to what in Zen they call just sitting, or shikantaza. And in Vipassana, there's often a kind of a sequential or a step-by-step kind of approach to settling in and arriving to this undirected attention. And so we begin with mindfulness of breathing. And I'd like to do a little teaching around this briefly. And that is, if we're practicing attention to breathing, mindfulness of breathing in meditation, it works when it doesn't work in this way, that it works if we're able to our attention stays stable and connected and continuous with the rhythm and flow of breathing in and breathing out. And as we do that, sometimes because the attention is no longer going into thinking, the thinking mind gets quieter and stiller, and then things open up in a nice way. But plenty of times, our ability to stay with the breathing doesn't work. And then it's like this. When many years ago, I was up in the mountains here, in the Santa Cruz Mountains, sitting at the edge of a creek, and it seemed like the creek, the water was not flowing at all. It was completely still. And so then I took a stick from the shore and put it into the river, into the creek, vertically. And then I could see there was a little wake formed on the surface of the water where the stick went into the water. And then I could see that the water wasn't still. There was a current that was flowing. So the same way, mindfulness of breathing is like the stick we put into the current of our lives. And we get to see more clearly how strong that current is, especially like the current of thinking or the currents of feelings that we might have. And so it isn't necessarily we're supposed to stay with the breath and criticize ourselves where we can't, but they just keep showing up for the breath, then highlights what it is that is really flowing and moving. Oh, look at that. My mind is really busy. It was busier and more actively involved in thinking than I realized, or I'm more interested in food than I ever could have imagined. That's all I think about. And that's the beginning of mindfulness, to see clearly what's going on. And the more clearly we can see, the more choice we have about where do we really want our attention to be. Do we want our attention to be hijacked by our neurosis, by our preoccupations? Or do we want our attention to be something that really enlivens us, embodies us, really kind of brings out a freedom of life that I would like to think of as simplicity. The simplicity of just being alive and letting life, the lived life, flow through us. So thank you, and I look forward to having this chance with you tomorrow morning. And for those of you in the intensive, there'll be a more formal welcome and introduction to the intensive program at our 10 o'clock program this morning later. And I look forward to seeing you, the intensive folks there then. Thank you.